Exposed. The haunted secrets of prehistoric humans 1.5 million years ago, a sinister survival tale. Karen woke with a gasp, sweat trickling down her back. The shadows danced in their small Springdale home like restless spirits, flickering lights overhead pulsing in time with her racing heart. The night was too quiet, the kind of silence that made every creak of the old house sound like a whispering threat. She brushed the sweat off her brow, trying to shake off the sinister thoughts that loomed like dark clouds overhead. Jake, her 11-year-old son, sat hunched over his laptop, his eyes wide with fascination. "Mom, did you know they found bones from prehistoric people around here?" His voice broke the tension, for a moment cutting through the dread swirling in the air. He read a headline about forgotten tribes, legends of ancient rituals that once thrived on this very land, the kind of stories that used to feel fantastical. Now, they wrapped him tighter in their grip. Soon, rumors of children disappearing filled their neighborhood like a toxic fog, pooling doubt and paranoia. Whispers wound through the abandoned streets where laughter used to echo a sound now replaced by the heavy weight of fear. Karen rubbed her temples, trying to rationalize the shadows and distant murmurs she could feel creeping in the walls at night. Exhaustion was her refuge from terror, or so she thought. "Mom, can I join Mr. Thompson's archaeological club?" Jake's bright eyes sparkled with ambition, oblivious to her unease. The well-respected history teacher had built a reputation for captivating the kids with stories about the land's past. But why was Karen constantly tangled in a web of suspicion about him? Mr. Thompson's fascination with the ancient seemed to drain the light from what was left of their neighborhood. Sure, she managed, masking her hesitation, a protective instinct flickering in her mind. As Jake delved into his new friendships, his playground became filled with ominous tales of a vengeful spirit awakened by ancient rituals. Karen snuffed out the stories like a candle threatening to go dark, but the chilling grip of those tales seeped into her skin. The fear wrapped around her, an unwelcome shawl beneath the shivering night sky. Night after night, the abnormality escalated. Shadows yo-yoed at the corners of her vision, disappearing as soon as she turned her head to face them, while the house hummed and throbbed like an anxious heartbeat. It was a symphony of dread. It left her paralyzed. Once, she had even seen Jake, frozen in place, staring into the darkness as the air thickened with a presence that shouldn't be there. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. One night, driven by a mix of desperation and fear, Karen ventured out into the bloodless streets where brightly painted houses stood like portraits of a forgotten era. The schoolhouse loomed ahead, its windows shattered as if it were a living thing weeping for the past. If anyone held answers, she was certain it would be here. As she entered the dilapidated building, an icy dread enveloped her. Memories hiding in the shadows whispered of ancient rituals meant to ward off evil. Then, a hidden chamber caught her eye, revealing relics that twisted her gut. As her heart raced, she felt a sinister presence washing over her, like fingers pulling her into the dark. Just as understanding began to twist in her mind, she heard Jake's laughter from behind, mixed with an echoing voice that was layered in something other than innocence. In that heart-stopping moment, she turned just as shadows brewed around her, knowing that confronting this buried truth might unleash horrors that had waited far too long. Karen spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. The laugh that had sounded so carefree now twisted in her gut, feeling all too foreign, an unnatural melody echoing in the decaying hall. The shadows shivered and creaked, like the rustle of long-forgotten bones awakening from slumber. "Jake," she called, voice trembling. Every fiber of her being screamed to run, to escape the dark, yet there was a magnetic force holding her rooted to the spot. The laughter took on a higher pitch, more like a scream than a child's glee, twisting through the air until it faded to a chilling silence. "Mom, over here." A hollow voice echoed from deeper within the chamber. Karen's breath hitched in her throat as she strained to hear. It was Jake, but it was wrong. The tone was twisted, drifting through the hall like smoke, malleable and dense with dread. "Jake, stay where you are." Panic laced her voice, forcing her to step further into the darkness. Shadows stretched, clawing at her. The air thickened with an oppressive weight, like an unseen hand pushing down on her chest. As she moved closer to the source of Jake's voice, she stumbled upon a small, circular room. The walls were lined with strange glyphs that seemed to writhe under the flickering light of her phone. They pulsed like a heartbeat, each throb whispering secrets from the past, fragments of ancient horrors that made her skin crawl. And then, she saw him. Jake stood in the center, motionless. His face was lit by an otherworldly glow, a flicker that danced across his features, yet his eyes were void, black pits of unfathomable depth. He stared ahead, mouth slightly parted as if caught between two worlds. "Jake!" she screamed, but the sound came out as a thin, wavering shout. She lunged forward, ready to snatch him away from whatever spell had ensnared him, but some unseen force shoved her back, slamming her against the wall. The impact jarred her senses, but she fought to steady herself. As she pushed against the wall, trying to gain ground, a falling piece of masonry swooped down, thudding hard next to her. The chamber echoed with laughter, a cacophony of cruel mirth that seemed to rise from the ancient relics, fueling the chilling atmosphere that drank in her courage. "Join us, Karen," the voice from the shadows crooned, distorting her name as if tasting it with malevolence. Her heart sank as she turned to see Mr. Thompson, standing just beyond the eerie glow. He looked different, eyes wide and manic, his skin pale and drawn tight, as if he were stretched across the very fabric of fear itself. "Join us," she stammered, confusion washing over her. "They've awakened," he hissed. "They were afraid you would come, but it's too late. The cycle must continue." Behind him, she glimpsed a shadow flicker across the wall, forming grotesque shapes that writhed with a life of their own. Parts of her wanted to believe this was just some elaborate ruse, a nightmare conjured from the dark recesses of her mind. But the menace in the air was suffocating, dragging the very belief that stood between her and sanity. "What cycle?" she cried, desperation pushing through her confusion. "It's already begun," Mr. Thompson said, his smile widening into something monstrous. The shadows behind him stirred, coalescing into a form that sent icy tendrils of dread racing through her. "And your son, he will not be spared." With a primal roar, she lunged at him, driven by a mother's love and instinct, but the shadows engulfed her like an avalanche, tearing away her grip on reality. As her world tilted into blackness, she caught one final glimpse of Jake, his laughter melding with the sinister whispers of the Ancient Ones. And then, darkness swallowed her whole. In that oppressive silence, a chilling thought bloomed in her mind. What if she had awakened something more than just the secrets of the past? Something that sought to reclaim its reign. A shudder ran through the air, a promise of pain. What lay beyond this veil of darkness? Karen's eyes snapped open, but her body lay heavy against the cold stone floor. Darkness clung to her like a shroud, thick and choking. She struggled to breathe, panic clawing at her throat. "Jake!" she gasped, forcing herself to sit up. The room felt alive, thrumming with an energy that pulsed just out of reach. Shadows seemed to writhe, shifting like snakes in her peripheral vision. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear the fog from her mind, but it clung, wrapping around her thoughts. Where was she? The glyphs formed a grotesque tapestry on the walls, whispering to her, taunting her with promises of truths she didn't want to hear. She shook her head, trying to focus. "Jake!" she shouted again, voice hoarse and cracking. A cold chill swept through the room, but no answer came. With trembling legs, she stood, forcing her body to cooperate. The shadows danced away from her, retreating as if they were afraid of her will. The laughter faded, but its echo gnawed at her mind. Then, a voice broke through the silence. "Mom, help me." It was Jake, distant yet clear. Karen's heart dropped. "I'm coming," she shouted, urging her legs to move. Each step felt like wading through molasses. Fear wrapped its fingers around her heart, squeezing tighter as she stumbled deeper into the dark. The circular room began to shift. The walls closed in, the glyphs swirling, making her dizzy. She pressed against the stone, trying to find her bearings, but the symbols began to glow, illuminating the path ahead. Follow the light, the whisper teased, echoing off the stone. She shuddered at its mockery. Jake! Her voice bounced off the walls, gathering strength as she navigated the twisted corridors. Every sound switched on her nerves, every creak announcing something lurking just out of sight. As she turned a corner, the passage opened up to a vast, ancient chamber. The ceiling soared high above her, lost in shadow. At its center, an altar stood, a cold pillar of stone, stained with dark stains that whispered of blood fresh and old. Jake! Panic stabbed her heart. She ran toward the altar, desperate. Where are you? Mom, they're here. His voice echoed again, but it was different now. It wavered, like it was coming from somewhere deep below. Jake, hold on. She sprinted to the edge of the altar, desperate to find a way down, but something slammed against her from behind. The force knocked her forward, sending her sprawling across the cold stone. Join us, Karen. The voice from before wrapped around her, chilling her to the bone. Above her, the shadows twisted, forming faces. Faces that were familiar yet distorted, with eyes hollow and mouths twisted in hideous glee. Rage surged through her like fire. Get away from me, she shouted, pushing herself back to her feet. But a pair of icy hands seized her, pulling her close. She gasped, the air freezing in her lungs. And there, hovering in the air, was the form of Mr. Thompson, his face a mask of malicious delight. They're waiting, Karen, he crooned, his teeth glinting like knives. For you, for Jake, and soon, it will all be over. She felt the shadows press down around her, pressing the air from her lungs. No, she screamed, thrashing against the grip, but it tightened. Suddenly, a blinding light broke through, scattering shadows in all directions. For a moment, she saw Jake, his features lit up with fear and worry, reaching out to her from across the chamber. Mom, he cried, voice desperate. Jake! But before she could move, a deafening roar erupted, shaking the stones beneath her feet. And then, just like that, the light vanished, swallowing him again. Join us, the shadows hissed, the hungry voices rising in a furious crescendo. As the very walls of the chamber began to vibrate and pulse with life, that eye in the darkness, something stirred beneath the altar, something ancient and unspeakable. What had she awakened? And what price would she ultimately pay to save her son? The shadows pulsed, swirling with an urgency that felt alive, alive like a heartbeat. Karen's breath quickened. No escape, just the primal scream of terror echoing in her mind. She stumbled back, feeling the cold stone altar press against her ribs as dread coursed through her. Mom, please. Jake's voice, raw and pleading, pierced through the chaos. It was more than just a sound. It was a lifeline. Jake, I'm coming. But the words felt hollow, lost in the enveloping darkness. The chill against her back hardened into a solid presence, almost like fingers trailing down her spine. She squeezed her eyes shut, refusing to let the shadows consume her. Breathless, she snapped her eyes open again and faced the altar. Something was shifting beneath its surface, the stone trembling as if it were alive. Stop, she shouted at whatever was stirring. Her own voice echoed, bringing back the taunting laughter of the shadows. Join us, Karen. They were so many voices, layering over each other, merging into one cacophony of sinister delight. Stay back, she screamed, clenching her fists. The altar suddenly erupted, sending a vibration rippling through the ground. Karen stumbled, grasping at the air as the very world trembled. A deep growl emanated from the shadows, resonating like thunder. The stone cracked, jagged fissures forming, revealing dark, swirling mist that seeped into the air, permeating every inch of the chamber. Mom, I can't hold on, Jake shouted, panic breaking through in his voice. Jake, she cried again, feeling her heart race. She took a step forward only to feel the icy grip tighten around her ankle, pulling her back. She yanked her foot free, stumbling again. There was only forward. The edges of the world blurred. The glyphs on the wall seemed to pulse in time with her racing heart. They were almost beckoning to her, shimmering with a dark promise. No, she cried, catching a glimpse of movement in the shadows. Something else was coming, something larger. From beneath the altar rose a figure, coalescing from the darkness. As it took form, Karen recognized it. Another familiar face grinned at her, twisted into something grotesque. It was Mrs. Thompson, her eyes hollowed, a smile that stretched too wide. Something was wrong, too wrong. They need you, Mrs. Thompson rasped, as if the shadows were using her voice. Join us forever. Karen felt bile rise in her throat. You're not real. None of you are real. Her world warped, and the laughter switched to howls of pain and hunger. The shadows around her surged, wrestling for control, for her. She had to hold on. She had to pull Jake back. Jake! She cried again, her throat raw. I swear, I won't let them take you. With newfound determination, she charged at the altar, heart pounding, ignoring the voices bubbling around her, drowning them out. Just a few steps she could do this. But as she reached for the edge, the shadows erupted around her like an explosion, reaching out with tendrils of darkness. They grabbed at her, fierce and relentless, resolute in their intent to pull her under. Mom! Jake's scream broke through the noise, sharp and urgent. In that moment, a flash of light erupted from the altar, illuminating everything for just a heartbeat. In that flash, she saw what was underneath the dark form shifting, eyes glinting with malice, waiting patiently in the shadows. The light flickered and then dimmed. The whispers grew louder, drowning out everything else. She could feel the ancient energy gripping her soul, begging her to surrender. But there was something else in the depths of the darkness, something she couldn't yet identify, but it felt alive and hungry. With a final push against the shadows, she cried out, I'll die before I join you. The moment froze. The shadows recoiled as if struck, withdrawing just enough to give her a fleeting glimpse of hope. But as the cold began to bind around her once more, she knew she was standing at the very edge of an unspeakable truth. What else lurked in the depths? What dark secret had she stumbled upon? Time was running out. And worse, what if Jake wasn't just in danger, but part of this ancient horror himself? The shadows shivered, recoiling with the fresh wave of defiance from Karen. This was a moment, a brief pause, where the darkness seemed to hesitate in its advance. She seized it, feeling urgency swell within her. Jake! She screamed. Her heart hammered against her ribcage, each beat a countdown. The echoes of her voice mingled with the shadows, creating a haunting melody of despair. Suddenly, the figure of Mrs. Thompson, still lurking by the altar, twisted grotesquely, her smile unnaturally wide, teeth glistening. You cannot save him. Karen, you cannot save yourself. The shadows surged forward, and Karen dug her nails into the stone altar, fighting for traction against the pull. The stone itself screamed in a timeless language, one of ancient malice and insatiable hunger. Stop! She shouted again, and anger ignited her voice. You don't own me. You don't own him. The shadows recoiled further, almost as if in shock. She took a breath, steel coursing through her. If you want him, you'll have to go through me. As if daring her, the ground split beneath her, and the sound of plunging blades rang in her ears. She felt the pulsating darkness crawl up her legs, icy fingers gnawing at her resolve. Each tendril teased her skin, wrapping around her wrists like chains stronger than any metal. Jake! She screamed again, trying to pierce through the veil of shadows, through the cacophony of mourning voices. Hold on. I'm coming. Mom. His voice was a fragile ember in the storm, flickering but refusing to die. Mom, help! The shadows screeched in collective outrage, drowning out her words. They twisted into a maelstrom, and she felt herself being pulled toward the altar, death beckoning her, a dark embrace promising oblivion. Through sheer force of will, she tore one arm free, reaching toward the swirling mass where Jake was trapped. Jake! Focus on my voice. But a deeper growl rose from somewhere far beneath the altar, reverberating off the walls as if the very chamber was alive with hungry echoes. The miasma of shadows thickened, almost tangible, slithering over her skin, clammy and sinister. Just as despair clawed at her, another flash of light ignited the chamber, sharp and blinding. She turned sharply towards it, her heart leaping. It was the altar, or rather, the force beneath it. She glimpsed eyes, countless eyes, swirling in the depths, each gleaming with malevolence and a twisted desire for her soul. Help me! Jake's voice became raw, barely audible beneath the cacophony of chaos. Stay with me, she ordered, choking on her own fear. Yet as the brightness faded again, the shadows bore down fiercely, engulfing her in thrumming darkness. The altar pulsed like a heartbeat, alive, almost sentient. "Join us forever," the chorus of voices surged. But before they could ensnare her, she fought against the tide. Closing her eyes against the brutal onslaught, she focused on Jake's presence, tethering herself to the warmth of his existence. As the shadows tried to curl around her mind, doubt crept in. Was it too late? Would she be swept into the abyss, her child lost forever? And then, she felt a new weight. Something pressing down on her, almost protective. It was the very darkness itself mingling with something else, a flicker of warmth in the chilling void. "Remember who you are?" A voice, her voice, echoed in her mind. With that, she exploded into motion, breaking free of the shadow's grasp and racing toward the glowing altar. She had to reach Jake before the darkness took him too. But just as she seized the altar's edge, everywhere around her was a deafening silence. The shadows halted, pressed together in an unnatural stillness. "Why, Karen?" Mrs. Thompson whispered, voice slithering out from the gloom, a venomous caress. "Why do you resist us?" Her heart dropped, adrenaline coursing. In the quiet that followed, the darkness shifted, revealing something twisted and unimaginable lurking deeper, an ancient horror ready to rise. A realization hit her, a terrifying, terrible understanding of what she was truly up against. And somewhere, deep within the shadows, her worst fear began to slither toward her, whispering secrets only they could know. Could she truly save Jake, or had she already lost him to the darkness? What awaited her in the shadowy depths, there at the altar? The breath caught in Karen's throat as the shadows shifted, pulsating with an energy that seemed alive, like a predator closing in on its prey. The weight of the entity beneath the altar pressed down on her, awakening an ancestral fear buried deep within her instincts. "Jake!" Her voice trembled, a mere whisper against the chaotic silence. She could almost feel the darkness smirking at her resolve, its laughter echoing in the chilling recesses of her mind. "Mom!" His voice was clearer now, bright against the darkness, but it quickly faded. "I can't hold on, no." The words slipped from her lips like a desperate plea. Panic surged, hot and suffocating. Each second felt like a lifetime. She had to save him. As she strained against the darkness, her fingertips dug into the altar, which burned with a heat so intense it threatened to consume her. The stone was alive, pulsing as if it had a heartbeat of its own. She could feel it wanting her as much as it wanted Jake. Given the shadows breathed, curling around her waist, trying to pull her down. "Join us!" A flash of anger surged. "No!" she roared, channeling every ounce of fury into her words. "You won't take me. You won't take my son." With a sudden clarity, she saw a path through the chaos, a flicker of light, drawing her focus. It shimmered at the center of the altar, vibrating with an otherworldly energy. It was a portal, a passage to something beyond. But beyond what? Hope or horror? "Jake!" she cried out again, her voice stronger now. "Listen to me. I'm right here. Focus." The shadows shrieked, a collective wailing that filled the chamber, competing with her words. They fought to drown her out, slithering closer, adding their weight to the chaotic pull toward the altar. Then, in a moment of unexpected stillness, she glimpsed Jake's face, faint but real, framed by a halo of shadow. She could see fear and determination etched across his small features. "Help me, Mom," he gasped, his eyes wide with terror. Tendrils of darkness reached for him, snaking along his sides, whispering empty promises. But she wasn't about to let them win. She yanked free another arm, feeling the cold resistance of the shadows bite into her skin, leaving trails of icy terror. "Jake, I'm coming." Breaking through the last barrier, she lunged toward him, an urgency propelling her forward. Suddenly, everything shattered. The chamber erupted with light as she leapt through the veil, her body colliding with the darkness wrapping around Jake. She felt their spirits clash, a bone-rattling force that sent tremors through the shadows. For a moment, the world fell into a blinding flash. When clarity returned, she found herself standing between Jake and the malevolent darkness that writhed close by. It swirled violently, sensing the intrusion, angry that she disrupted its grasp. "Get away from him," she shouted, her voice erupting like thunder. The shadows recoiled, hissing in a frenzy, but still, the dark energy surged forward, massing into a gigantic figure, an entity taking shape, its form twisting and flickering like a bad signal on an old TV. It was monstrous, with glowing eyes that seemed to absorb light, each gaze piercing her resolve. "Foolish mother," it boomed, the voice echoing around them. "You cannot protect him. I will consume what is yours." Karen's heart pounded, but something strange began to unfurl inside her. A flicker of courage reminded her of the warmth she'd felt before, a shroud of protection that began to expand, forming a barrier surrounding her and Jake. "Feel my love," she cried, channeling every ounce of her spirit into those words. "You cannot take him." The figure snarled, the air crackling with tension. In that electric moment, she realized the shadows wanted to break her, to turn her against her own. But she wouldn't allow it. Not now, not ever. As the tension built, she sensed a shift within the shadows, a fracture in their power. With every heartbeat, she urged her love outward, standing firm against the tide of despair. But would it be enough? The entity howled, reverberating through the chamber. "This battle has only just begun," and with that proclamation, everything plunged into darkness once more. What would come next? Could she still save Jake, or had she merely awakened a greater horror that would now be unleashed? The air was thick with silence, a heavy blanket pressing down around them in the aftermath of the entity's proclamation. Karen's heart raced, thundering in her chest, each beat echoing like a death knell in the silence of violation of peace she couldn't afford. With Jake's gaze locked onto her, a glimmer of hope still flickered in the depths of his wide eyes, a fragile lifeline in a sea of darkness. "Mom." His voice cracked like thin ice, uncertainty threading through his words. Panic twisted her stomach into knots. "What do we do?" She looked around, feeling the shadows crawling closer, whispering their dark secrets to the air. They seeped into the cracks of her mind, probing for weaknesses, looking to exploit her fear. "We fight, Jake, together." But as she spoke, an unsettling chill seeped into her bones, a reminder of the entity's promise. It wasn't just her fight. What would happen to Jake if she failed? The power loss she felt, a gnawing void, reminded her of how fragile their situation was. She would need more than love. She needed a plan, summoning the remnants of her strength. Karen glanced at the altar still glowing faintly, pulsing like a warning beacon. Every instinct told her to reach for it. But what lay beyond that shimmering surface? A portal to salvation? Or something worse? "We have to get to the light," she urged, gripping Jake's arm tightly. Now, the shadows hissed in fury, their monstrous form undulating, the darkness writhing like a living, breathing thing, pulsating with eager malice. They moved as one, slinking toward them with a predatory grace that made her skin crawl. "Join us," they cooed, their voices a haunting lure. "You want to be with him?" "No," Karen shouted, planting her feet firmly on the ground. She refused to succumb. "Jake is my son. I won't let you take him." The shadows recoiled, momentarily halted by her fierce determination. But even as she managed to deflect their advance, she felt the cold tendrils wrap around her ankles, anchoring her down, their chill lingering like a grip from the grave. "Mom," Jake cried, fighting against the shadows that sought to ensnare him. "I don't want to let you go." Their connection ignited something deep within her, a surge of protective instinct that flared, bright and unyielding. Karen thrust her arms out, willing the warmth of her love to break through the suffocating darkness. "We can do this. Trust me." With a crucial thought, she tried to remember the moment before all this, the warmth of home, the laughter, the shared moments that stitched their lives together. She let those memories bridge the chasm, feeding off them to expand her barrier. "Stay close, Jake. Don't let go of my hand." As the shadows crept forward again, their angry wails crescendoed, pressing against her mind, aiming to drown out her resolve. "Come to me. Come to us," they bellowed, their voices intertwining in a web of deceit. Fingers trembling, Karen felt the shadows easing their grasp, just for a moment, just enough. It was enough. She lunged for the glowing altar, her heart racing anew. But in that split second of focus, the monstrous shadow lunged as well, anger and desperation driving it. The moment they collided sent ripples through the air, the altar flickering erratically, a cruel dance of light and dark that left her breathless. "Mom, help!" Jake's voice cried out, panic seeping into the edges of his words. the light struggling to push back the encroaching shadows that tangled around him. And just like that, the light from the altar flickered, brightening but threatening to shatter. What if she couldn't hold it? What if it all fell apart? Please, not now. She screamed into the chaos. The shadows howled in response, their frustration morphing into a malevolent laugh, echoing through the abyss. You think you can win? This is just a taste. Then, with a blinding flash, the altar erupted with light, filling the chamber. But amid the brilliance, darkness gathered around them, swirling and constricting as if threatened by their resistance. Could she keep the darkness at bay? Could she actually save Jake? The pulse of the altar quickened, and Karen could feel that the true nature of the fight was still hidden beneath layers of obscured dread. But something more sinister was unfurling behind her. What else awaited them within this twisted maze of shadow and light? Where would it lead them next? The light surged, a brilliant beacon that sliced through the threatening dark, yet Karen could feel the shadows tightening their grip. This was not a straightforward power struggle. They were cunning, manipulating fear and doubt, both in her and in Jake. Hold on, Jake. Just a little longer. She fought against the icy fingers wrapping themselves around her waist, but each struggle only seemed to incite more chaos. Dark whispers curled around her ears, promising safety if she surrendered. No, she gasped, shaking her head to dispel their seductive murmurings. The altar pulsed again, flames dancing at its base, illuminating grotesque faces emerging from the shadows. Each visage twisted in a rictus of despair and malice. Eyes hollow yet penetrating, they stared with malevolence, promising pain and suffering to follow. Into the light, she yelled, her voice trembling but holding firm, clinging to her son. Come with me. But as she pushed forward, she felt Jake's hand slip slightly. No. Panic clawed at her throat. The shadows clawed at him, their whispers mingling with his cries of distress. Mom, I can't, he panted, tears streaming down his cheeks. Each cry splintered her heart. Memories flashed before Karen's eyes, a birthday party filled with laughter, Jake's first steps, stories read at bedtime. I love you, she shouted, pouring every ounce of strength into her voice, forcing it into the dark. You are not alone. The shadows shrieked, momentarily stunned by her words, the dreadful wails hanging in the air like thick, choking fog. For a fleeting moment, the world felt suspended. The altar shined brighter, its light blazing through the darkness. And just when Karen thought it was enough, something shifted. A deep tremor shook the very ground beneath them. The altar responded to this shift, vibrating violently, strobing between vivid light and overwhelming blackness. Time is running out. The shadows hissed, anger thickening the air. Behind Karen, a sinister laughter echoed, chilling her to the bone. You think it's just a light? This illusion can only blind you. Mom, what's happening? Jake gasped, fighting against the encroaching blackness with the desperation of a drowning child. She couldn't answer. The panic rising in her throat felt like steel, sharp and unfathomable. Shadows drifted toward them, weaving through the air like mist, blocking the altar's light, corrupting its beauty. The bitter chill spread as they whispered promises of truth and peace, feeding on her fear, coaxing her to join them. In that instant, the ground buckled. Time seemed to fracture. She glimpsed something beyond the altar, gaping dark mouths, teeth sharp and glistening with hunger. Behind them, the shadows shrieked like banshees, and she realized they were closing in on her, each step forward only bringing her closer to being swallowed whole. We have to go now. She pulled Jake hard, desperation fueling her, but it was maddeningly hard to breathe. Suddenly, a blinding light burst from the altar again, radiating warmth, threatening to splinter apart under the pressure of the encroaching shadows. Jake was quivering, his little body clinging to her with all his might. Then it hit her: the altar was not just a light. It was alive, responding to their fear and determination. Its pulsing light needed her strength to truly bloom. Jake, focus on me, she cried, just trust me. We beat this together. As if responding to her words, the shadows shrieked, furious at this unexpected resistance. Together, together, the whispers countered, attempting to weave their own spell around Jake. Karen squeezed her eyes shut, forcing her memories forward, using all the love she had for her son as fuel for the light. The darkness began to pull back, but she could feel something monumental approaching from behind her, something worse than what they had faced so far. "Jake!" Her warning was cut off as a new wave of shadows rushed at them, converging like a storm, the altar's brightness flickering in response. "Mom." Jake's voice wavered, but she knew the truth now. There was no turning back. They had to push through. The darkness writhing around them twisted violently, as if sensing her resolve. She could only look forward. And just like that, the ground dropped beneath her feet. Would they fall into the abyss, consumed by shadow? Or could they finally break free into the blinding light on the other side? With the abyss beneath them, she shouted, "Hold on tight, Jake." Against the dark. The moment hung in the air, the outcome uncertain, the shadows howling their fury above the chaos. What awaited them in the glow? As they plunged into the light, everything changed. The light consumed them, and for a heartbeat, nothing existed but warmth and brilliance. It was an embrace, a cocoon against the horrors surrounding them. Then, just as quickly, the radiance began to ripple, twisting like a mirage, and the ground solidified beneath them with a violent thud. Karen opened her eyes, heart racing, hoping against reason. They were not in the darkness anymore, but something felt just as ominous. The once warm light had transformed into a blaring white that sickened her stomach. The air smelled stale, like decay. She blinked furiously, struggling to comprehend their surroundings. "Jake?" she whispered, fear nipping at her heels. "Mom." His voice was faint, almost lost to the oppressive atmosphere. She turned sharply, spotting him in the distance, a figure struggling to rise amidst a stretch of shadowy mist. "Over here." She sprinted towards him, her heart pounding against her ribcage. With each step, the shadows swayed, almost alive, pulsating like a heart beating in time with her fear. And that laughter, echoing behind her again, slithered into her ears, chilling her to the core. "Don't look back, Mom. Don't let them take you." Jake screamed, his eyes wide with terror. She reached him just in time, grabbing his trembling hand. "We have to find a way out." But where? The landscape was unfamiliar, a warped reflection of the world they had just fled. Distorted trees, twisted and grotesque, clawed at the marred sky like desperate fingers. The ground was slick, unsettling underfoot as if it were still recovering from the agony of their arrival. Suddenly, they heard a chorus of whispers rising from the shadows, wrapping around them like a vice. "You should have stayed. You should have given in." The voices were familiar, creeping into her mind like a sneaky serpent. "Here, you'll see the truth." A sudden chill raced down her spine. "Jake, don't listen." She clung to him, wanting to shield him from the darkness that sought to lure them. Yet, as she looked around, faces emerged from the mist, familiar faces twisted in anguish. Her heart dropped as she recognized them. Friends. Family. Lost. "No, no," she screamed, squeezing Jake's hand even tighter. "They're not real. It's a trick. But Mom, I see them. They're calling for help." His voice was trembling, confusion settling in with the fear. "Can't we save them?" "Jake, listen to me." Karen was desperate, panic clawing at her throat. "They want to pull you in. Don't trust them." But as she turned to run, the world began to shift again, the ground twisting beneath their feet like a serpent uncoiling. In that moment of distraction, the shadows surged forward, and Jake's grip slipped from hers. "Mom," he cried, reaching out wildly as the darkness consumed him. "No," she screamed, lunging after him, but it was as if the air solidified against her, holding her back. She fought against it, her body screaming for her to move forward, but it was no use. Instinct grabbed her, pulling her away from the grasping shadows. "Fight, Jake. Fight against it." She felt tears stream down her face in the onslaught of despair and terror. "You are stronger than this. Remember our memories." "Mom." His voice was barely perceptible, now just a desperate echo swallowed by the howling darkness. With a final surge of will and love, Karen tore herself free from the dark clutches holding her, moving towards the shimmer of the fading light. But with every step, the shadows writhed, screaming threats and promises that thrummed in her ears. "Leave him and join us. There's freedom here." Freedom? The word felt like acid on her tongue. She would not abandon her son. Not to this. Not ever. In a last-ditch effort. With all her strength, she surged toward the light, her heart pounding mercilessly. The The shadows howled in retaliation, their cold fingers lashing out in anger. And then the ground trembled once more. She stumbled, throwing her hands out for balance. And as the world spun, she caught a glimpse of Jake again, his wide blue eyes, full of fear, the distance between them stretching like an endless chasm. Mom. But the shadows were clawing at her, filling her vision with their loathsome faces. She felt herself teetering on the edge, slipping closer to darkness once more. Believe. The command whispered through her, and instinctively, she grasped at the warmth in her heart, memories of laughter and love thrusting her forward. But at that moment, something shifted again, sharp and sudden, and everything went black. What awaited her in the abyss? Would she find Jake again, or was he forever lost in the dark? The echoes of laughter and whispers faded, leaving only silence and the chilling certainty that this was not the end. Karen took a shuddering breath, the oppressive silence pressing in on her from all sides. The darkness felt like a tangible presence, wrapping around her like a heavy cloak. But within that void, a flicker small but potent sparked in her chest. "I want to give in," she whispered, pushing through the fear, fueled by the thought of Jake. As if in response, the shadows shifted, swirling like a storm. She blinked, disoriented, but her resolve held firm. "You want him? You'll have to go through me," she shouted, voice ripping through the stillness. The shadows recoiled momentarily, as if they felt her defiance. In that precious second, she felt a surge of warmth, a memory of Jake's laughter, the joy of his first steps, the endless joy of being his mother, a truth stronger than despair. "Jake!" she cried into the depths, her voice piercing the darkness. "I'm coming. Stay with me." The shadows thrummed in angry rhythm, but she could hear him, his voice clutching at her heart, even chained by the dark. "Mom, I'm scared." She forced herself to move, pushing against the tide. Heart pounding, she stumbled forward, each step a battle against the cold grip trying to pull her back. The altar loomed ahead like a lighthouse in a storm. "We can take the light, Jake. Focus on the love. That's our path." With renewed determination, she sprinted. The ground bucked, threatening to swallow her whole, but love was a fire, blazing against the despair surrounding her. "I'll find you," she screamed, her voice imbued with raw power. "Together. Always." And then she saw him, a silhouette in the distant dark, small yet unwavering. She could feel his energy tugging against the malevolence. "Mom, help." His voice wavered, laden with a mixture of fear and desperation. "Hold on," she shouted fiercely, charging forward as blood surged through her veins, igniting purpose. The shadows shrieked, angry cries colliding into her, tangling and intertwining, but she wouldn't let them silence her. Bursting with adrenaline, she reached him, their hands connecting, fire meeting ice. She felt the familiar warmth of love surge through the space between them, and it wrapped around her like a protective shield. Together, they could break this curse. "You will not take him," she bellowed, standing firm as the shadows reared back in rage, gnarled faces twisting in anger. With each heartbeat, the altar pulsed, glowing brighter, responding to their defiance, illuminating the chamber. "Stay with me, Jake." Mom, his voice trembled, but she could see his determination solidifying. It mirrored her own. The shadows writhed again, anxious murmurs forming a cacophony of terror. "You will fall, you will lose him, join us." But their words were tangled, a hollow ruse. With her heart burning like a beacon, Karen knew she had a choice: let fear weave its cruel web around them, or harness their love to forge a new beginning. "Together," she shouted, squeezing Jake's hand tighter. "I'll never let you go." He matched her fervor, and that roar of unity shattered the darkness. Suddenly, the light erupted. It was blinding, a pure, cleansing brilliance spilling from the altar, coursing from her heart and Jake's, flooding the space around them. The shadows screamed, screeching as the light pierced their essence, revealing their terrible forms. In that dazzling moment, she lunged into the glow, pulling Jake with her. It felt like breaking through the surface of water, air rushing back into her lungs, and with every ounce of her being, she pushed through the roaring darkness, and then it was gone. Karen opened her eyes, astonished. They stood in a clearing bathed in golden light, the air warm and sweet. The shadows dissipated, unable to follow them here. They were free. "Mom?" Jake asked, his eyes wide, searching and wary. "It's okay, sweetie," she soothed, kneeling down, enveloping him in a tight embrace. "We're safe." Tears pooled in her eyes as the weight of the nightmare began to dissipate into sunlight. Turning, she took in the vibrant green of the trees, the chirps of birds performing sweet symphonies overhead. They were back. "For now," she whispered, pulling back to look at him. "But we have to be careful. Those shadows can reappear if we're not vigilant." His little face lit up, hope shining as he smiled. "We're together, Mom. And we fought them." "Yes, we did." She beamed, pride swelling in her chest. "And we'll always fight for each other." They walked hand in hand, savoring every moment, the soft warmth of the sun, the promise of new beginnings dawning before them. As they reached home, Karen felt a shift in the air, her heart lighter. Perhaps the darkness would always linger on the edges of their lives, but now they knew. They could combat it together. "Can we go camping tonight?" Jake chirped, eagerness bubbling within him. Karen chuckled, nodding. "Sure, just let me grab some supplies. Just a tent and snacks." He rushed ahead, excitement flaring as he dashed inside. Watching him, Karen felt a wellspring of warmth. They were more than survivors. They were a team, armed with a bond that the darkness couldn't break. They would make new memories, filled with laughter and light in that moment, Karen vowed. Even if shadows dared to return, they were ready. They would blink away the darkness, one day at a time. And above, the sun continued to shine, a promise of hope for tomorrow, reminding her that she was never alone in this fight. Now is the time to take action. If you love this conclusion, subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and show your support. It makes all the difference. We need to hear your thoughts in the comments, so flood the comments section with your reactions and theories. And instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need this thrilling conclusion in their lives. Don't wait even one more second to show you're a true fan.